Ladies and gents, what is going on? You guys look beautiful today. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Berardo Podcast. I am your host, Tony Berardo. Cannot thank you enough for checking this episode out and all the other episodes. I've been getting a lot of love from you guys, so I cannot thank you enough. Don't be afraid to leave a review down in the podcast app you're using, whether it's an Android or Apple device or YouTube, however you're watching this. Your reviews are what drive me to be better. So if it sucks, let me know. If you got something to add, let me know. I might do another episode to follow up on it. You got questions, we can do another episode on that. In fact, the reason why I'm doing this episode on podcast basics is because I had a lot of people, like over 10, which is a lot for me, reached out to me to ask me, why did I start a podcast? What do I got to do to start a podcast? Is it expensive? So instead of answering a bunch of different people, I said, fuck it. Let me just do a podcast on how to do a podcast. So that's what we're going to do. So let's get right into it.
You're just funny. It's funny, the way you tell the story and everything.
Funny how?
Come here though. Yeah, he's crazy, see? Who are you?
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Are you ready?
Okay, so guys, thank you so much again for tuning in. This is a very exciting episode. I did want to get right into it, but before I do, I want to give a special shout out to STI Fine Food. You guys hear me talk about them all the time. They're big supporters of the podcast. I can't thank you guys enough. I'm a big fan of their food. You know, they have great Italian food, and me being Italian, it's been hard for me to actually eat Italian food because of my I don't want to say vegan, but my vegetarian restrictions. I've been saying vegan, but now that I've done research and kind of dug into the culture a little bit more, I realize that I'm not technically vegan because I have honey, and I love honey, and I'm not going to stop eating honey. And I guess because bees make it, you know, you're an asshole if you have honey. I don't know. It's some of those guys are crazy. Those vegan guys. I do it not because I want to. It's because I have to, because of my my health issues. So if it was up to me, I would eat steak and chicken all the time. But you know, hey, it is what it is. Just food. Good news though is I got a company like STI Fine Foods that help get me through the day, and they do it with some great Italian food. They got tons of pasta. They have gluten-free pasta. They have vegetarian pasta, which is great for me. And some of them are made out of chickpeas and red lentils. It's really, really delicious. A little bit of salt and pepper, and you're in the game. I mean, it's that good. So definitely check them out. They have sauces and spreads and all types of stuff, just like Grandma used to make, except the meatballs. Can't have those. But if you want to check them out, go to stifinefood.com, and in the shopping cart, use the code THEBERARDO. They're going to hook you up with a wicked good discount. Make sure you shoot them a message on Instagram at STI Fine Food. Let them know you ordered something, because sometimes they hook it up. I'm telling you, the company's the bomb, and I cannot wait for them to get more stuff in the States. They're over in Italy right now, so they're trying to do everything they can to ship as much of their products over here as they possibly can. But, you know, with Europe and all those restrictions, it's kind of weird shipping types of stuff. But if you order from their website and use the code THEBERARDO, you'll get that thing within 2 days. So think about it like Amazon for Italian food. Yeah, it's pretty gangster. Except you don't have to pay an annual fee, like the Prime. Just saying, might be better. But today's episode is going to be pretty cool if you ever thought about starting a podcast, because it's talking about the basics. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to bombard you with a bunch of stuff. You can go on YouTube and probably check out a lot of great videos on how to start a podcast. That's what I did. I don't want to give you all that information because I'm not so knowledgeable. I think this is like my 41st or 42nd episode, something like that. So I'm going to give you the basics because a lot of people ask me, should I start a podcast? Is it expensive? You know, is there benefits to it? Like, why'd you do it? So we're going to kind of go into that. We're going to do a bullet point style. So first things first, pick a topic. That's it. Pick a topic. If you have to pick a topic about something you like, that'd probably be better. You don't want to pick a topic about what's trendy or what's cool, because what's trendy today might not be trendy tomorrow. And also, too, if you pick something trendy, if you don't really know about it, people are going to read right through your bullshit. So for me, I wanted to pick a topic about me. You know, I like talking about what goes on in my life. I think life is great. I think life is funny. I think weird shit happens to us. And I wanted to be able to talk about it without completely just boring my wife to death, because I talk to her all the time, and sometimes she looks at me and goes, this was before I started a podcast, she looks at me and goes, hey, don't you have like friends you could talk to about this shit? Like, it's too much. I was like, okay. So what I decided to do was I just grabbed a mic, a little cheap mic. In fact, this is the mic. If you don't follow me on YouTube, you can't see this, but that's the mic. It was like $8 or $10 for this thing on Amazon. It was a lavalier microphone. That's it. And I just hooked that up to my phone and started talking, and just put a bunch of things down, things that I liked. You know, that's the topic you got to pick. So fitness, health, wellness, happiness, management, sales, saving money. You know, these are all things that I struggled at, but I like to think I got better at. So I wanted to talk about this stuff on the podcast. You know, that was the big thing. So that's number one, right? Get a topic. Second thing is name the podcast. That's probably the big thing. I struggled back and forth on this. There was a lot of names I wanted to do. I think, what was the other? It was like, I thought it was pretty clever. I was going to call it All Things Human. Like the All Things Human podcast. I thought that was kind of cool. And then I had this idea of like the channel art, which is the cover you see on your app, of like the evolution. You know, the ape turning into the human, and the human was going to be like a silhouette of me, essentially, like flexing or something. I don't know, something stupid. But like the evolution of that All Things Human, where I was going to talk about, you know, everything that we do as humans. And I thought that was cool, but then I'm like, I don't know, that kind of, you know, puts me in like a different genre that I didn't want to really go down. I wanted to make it more personal. You know, I wanted to make it just not necessarily about me, but I wanted to kind of flow into my social media. And my social media, you know, Instagram and Facebook, it's been the Berardo for ever since I started them. That was like my first tag, and you know, I use that with everything. That's my email. I mean, it's everything. So I kind of wanted to go into that, and I'm like, why don't I just call it the Berardo podcast? That way I can have the wife on, and because now her last name's Berardo, it just makes sense. So that's what I named it, the Berardo podcast. And I knew it was going to be easy to make channel art because it was just going to be a picture of me. And that's what it is. So you got to name the podcast, right? So pick a topic and then pick the name. The name's not important, in my opinion. I don't think it is, because if you have good content and you have a subject people want to hear about and talk about, I mean, they're going to listen to it. It doesn't matter if it's called the shit podcast or the greatest podcast on earth. Some of the coolest podcasts that I know of don't necessarily have the best names. I mean, hell, if you ever hear of Gary Vee, you know, he's a big New York Times bestseller, a social media icon. You know, he's a business owner of Manor Media. That guy's podcast is called The Gary Vee Audio Experience. Joe Rogan is The Joe Rogan Experience. I mean, they're not crazy, flashy names, but they deliver great content, and that's why people listen. People don't listen because of the name. So don't overthink it. Just pick something. It's not that big of a deal. And that leads me to number 3, which is just record. Don't worry about, you know, do I have this or that? Do I have the right website? Do I have the right... Just don't worry about any of that. Just record. Record yourself talking about whatever topic you're passionate about. You know, it's funny. A podcast is not very different from like an Instagram story. You know, like if you're doing this and you're just doing Instagram, hey, we're at the Universal Studios. We're having a good time. We just rode Transformers. It was so fun. That's a podcast. You could talk about that. You could talk about what you did at Universal. You know, if it's just a podcast about you, it's essentially a vlog. It's a journal that's audio. It's a blog that's audio. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this, you know, thought out bullet point podcast. If people like the content, they're going to listen to it. So if you want to start a podcast about photography, just talk about photography. It doesn't necessarily have to be structured at first or have these crazy outlines and this game plan that you put together. I think my very first podcast, which wasn't that long ago, was maybe a year ago, 11 months ago, something like that. And it was called Poppin' the Cherry. That's it. Because it was my first podcast. So I couldn't think of a title. So I'm just going to call it Poppin' the Cherry. So I just went on and kind of talked about, why I wanted to do a podcast. And I'm going to do what I can to continue to grow the podcast. And that was almost a year ago. And again, that was when I used this little lavalier mic, and I hooked it up to my phone, and I use voice memos. You guys know the app on iPhone, and I use that to record, and I just uploaded it. I already had a website, which leads me to number 4, is getting a website to upload your podcast. So I use WordPress. I know there's a lot of great ones out there. I think the number 1 podcast site is Libsyn, Libsyn, I think. But that's the oldest. I think that's been around since like 2004, so it might be the most popular. But Blueberry is also a good one, and it's Blueberry spelt with no E's, so Blueberry. I don't know. It's stupid. Doesn't make any sense, but it's called Blueberry, I think. So that's a good one as well. But I use WordPress because before I even started a podcast, I had a blog, so I would post like recipes and workout routines and just like blogs of like trips I went on. So I've been doing that for years. Turns out though, WordPress actually has a podcast like add-on where you would just pay. So that's what I did. I just paid, I think it's like an extra $10 a month or something like that. So it's $120 annually, which is cheaper than those other websites I mentioned. And you can just upload a podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast right now, it's through WordPress. So if you enjoy the layout, the look, how simple it is. If you go to my website, theberardo.com, and again, that's another thing is my website was theberardo.com 5 years ago. So I wanted to stick with the podcast because now to go to the podcast, it's theberardo.com/the podcast. Very simple. So again, I would recommend that. It's pretty easy to use. A lot of great tutorials and walkthroughs on it. But I really enjoy that. But, again, whatever website you guys are using or whatever program you want to use to upload your podcast, I recommend just doing some research, just looking around, see what the cheapest part is, because I kind of look at this podcast like working out. I look at a lot of things like working out, but I mainly kind of look at this because New Year's resolution, you might say, hey, I want to work out, 5 days a week, and you end up canceling your membership after 6 months. You don't want to spend all this money on a website and materials and microphones and all that if you're not going to stick with it. So that's kind of what I did. Is I used this little microphone. It cost me $10 on Amazon, and I used my phone to record everything, and I uploaded that to my computer, and that was it. It wasn't. If you go to my very first podcast, which I'll leave the link in this episode, but if you go to my very first one, it was not impressive. I can't even listen to it because it's just the quality sucks and the layout looks stupid, and I just wasn't excited about it. But again, I had to do 20, 30 episodes before I was like, okay, I want to do this full time. Like I want to do like 2 or 3 episodes a week. Like I want to have guests on. Like I want to do this the right way. So I think it's important that you got to try it out just like anything else and see if you're going to stick with it. And if you are, then you can worry about the investment. And that leads me to the next thing, which I think we're at number 4? I lost track. But number 4 is spend money to make money is false with the podcast. Do not get leaked into the sexiness of having like this cool microphone and these awesome headsets and this cool backdrop and this great camera. Do not get sucked into that shit right away. See if you like the podcast first. See if you like doing it before you think it's worth the money. So again, for me, I didn't spend more than $10 on a podcast until episode 20. And then even then, I got a used microphone, right? And it's one of the best ones, but it was like $40 or $50. But there's some out there that are like $300, $400. I don't even need that. I don't want that because the quality is decent. You can hear me. You're listening. I mean, I can hear myself with these headphones. And by the way, these are just old headphones that I've had for like 10 years. They're skull candies. Like, you don't need the microphones that, Joe Rogan has and all that shit. I mean, that guy has tons of money before he even started a podcast, so he could invest into it. I wanted to make sure that I'm giving you good content and quality content. You're not going to see all this glamour. Like this camera, you don't know if it's actually a nice camera or not so nice camera. Most of my podcasts, I actually film on my phone, my iPhone. I have an iPhone 7 through work, and I have an iPhone 10. So, I mean, you could film it on your phone and post on YouTube if you want. But do not get crazy spending a bunch of money, because for less than $100, you can get a podcast up and running today, and it'll be just as good as mine. Now, of course, once you get a little bit more cozy like I did, I was blessed enough when we bought this other home that the wife let me have my office space, and this is now my podcast studio. Before, my podcast studio was a corner in the room that I would use when the wife was out, like working or something like that, or she's working late, or she leaves early or something like that. I might do like a 20-minute podcast before I go to work, and I would just do like in the corner in the room, right? So now I have this really cool studio, quote unquote, which is really just my office for work. And I upgraded my camera a little bit, but we mainly did the camera and the upgrade and the mic upgrade and all that stuff because we also do a lot of photography too. So it's kind of like a hobby of me and the wife. So we picked up a camera as a kind of a joint thing, but now I use this camera for podcasting as well. So again, I didn't fully invest into podcasting like materials or equipment until probably a year in. I think I'm at 11 months, and I just spent a few $100 on this camera and some new mics. Because I need more mics, just because, now I'm having guests and stuff. But before it was just me talking. So spend money to make money is bullshit when it comes to the podcast game, in my opinion. Now, of course, maybe if you spend a lot of money, you might be more excited and you might do more podcasts and all that stuff. But again, if you spend $500 or $600 or $700 on a shit ton of equipment and your podcast just sucks because you don't have good content or people don't want to listen to you, was it worth the money? Probably not. So just kind of take that into account. The next thing is, once you figure all this stuff, you have to submit your RSS feed. And again, once you figure out your website and everything you want to upload, you upload to your website, you're going to get this, what they call RSS feed. And that's something that you can submit to all the channels that support podcasts, like Spotify, iTunes, whatever Google is, the Google Play, the Android, you Android freaks out there that have Android. So you can submit that. iHeartRadio now has podcasts, so you submit your RSS feed to that, and usually everyone gets approved. So I'm available on all platforms. I think they just mainly look at like content, material, maybe your channel art, stuff like that, to see if it's graphic or something like that. So. But that's it. I mean, that's the basics, in terms of channel art. If you guys notice, when you look for my podcast, the Barada Podcast, you see a picture of me and then my logo. So I actually created that logo myself, and the picture was taken by a buddy of mine. But I use this app called Canva, Canva. You can go on their website as well, canva.com. And they're not affiliated with the podcast at all, but I really enjoy it because I use all my episodes with that, like YouTube and all that jazz. I use Canva to create all my channel art because they actually have templates. So like if you wanted to post something on Facebook, let's say, like the Facebook cover has certain measurements. Well, Canva already has those templates available. So you just type in Facebook cover and it'll actually go up and you could post something and it'll be that exact size that you want. So I do the same thing with my podcast. So just a little side note there for your channel art. But last thing I want to end with is why even do a podcast? Why start one? Well, I think podcasts are the future. I really do. I think people are more audio now. I don't think people like to read as much as they like to listen to books. So it's the same thing with information. I think when you're in your car, maybe you're more amped up on a long drive to listen to maybe like an hour podcast that's educational as opposed to jamming out to music. Of course, we do that as well, but music is a great a great avenue to get you hyped up, get you excited. Maybe you do that during a workout to get you pumped up. But nowadays, I think people are wanting to get more educated. So I think it's important that podcasts continue to thrive And if you have something to give of value, don't waste it on yourself. Show people, tell people. If you're good at dancing, create a podcast on how to dance. It doesn't necessarily have to be visual. For me in particular, I like to hear things because I use my imagination to create the environment. So, if someone did a podcast about dancing and I'm a dancer, it might be kind of cool to have my buds in, and then I'm practicing the dance moves on my own, and you're telling me how to do the steps, right? I don't need to see it. Maybe I just listen to it. I don't know. I don't know anything about dance. But I don't think there's a wrong subject to talk about on a podcast. I think a big portion of us should have podcasts because if we all learn from each other, we're all going to get better at certain things. And sometimes we don't know how to ask for help. So having a podcast is kind of like a private way to learn about subjects that we want to learn about. So if you got value that you want to give and you feel like you're a little bit introverted, that's okay. Remember, it's a podcast. It's by yourself. That's what's also kind of cool. A little bit different than like vlogging or videotaping yourself. You don't necessarily have to be so extroverted. You can be introverted too. So podcasts are a great way to do that. But I think everyone should have a podcast, to be honest with you. I think they're really cool. I listen to them myself all the time. I have a couple favorites in mind that I listen to. Matt Diavella is great. He has the Ground Up Show. I listen to that. Of course, Joe Rogan and Gary Vee and motivational stuff, funny stuff. A lot of comedians have podcasts, so there's tons of great things to learn out there. And I think if you're semi-educated on one of those things, I think you need to give value and you need to share the love and get it out there. So if you guys have anything to add or any other comments or questions, I'd love to hear about it. I'm going to do a more detailed episode on how to create a podcast, but this was just kind of the cliff notes to get you started. So I hope I inspired at least one person today to create a podcast. Don't be shy. Get it out there. Don't spend a lot of money. Just go out there, get a cheap mic, and just start talking into the mic and just get it out there. And real is better. Don't edit. I don't like to edit. I'm going to post this out without editing. I screwed up a couple times, but I'm just going to throw it out there because it's real. And people like that. I like that. I like to hear podcasts like that. So I'm not going to be a hypocrite and change mine up. So go out there, get creative, and, have some fun. All right, guys, I'm out. Peace.